So the SBDC, we primarily specialize in, we're partially subsidized by SBA, Small Business Administration, and we specialize in two things. We graded on a couple different things, but the two things that we specialize in is business starts and capital infusion. So we help business owners before they start with their business plan, their projections, before they file their incorporation or their entity documents, and then after they start generating revenue. And we also specialize in capital infusion, helping them find the right financing and the resources to get the money they need. So these are some of our results. The SBDC in Sacramento was taken over by hosted by the Sacramento Metro Chamber, in the end of 2014. 2015 was our first year of inception and going out to the marketplace and helping small business owners. These are our results from 2015. You'll notice on the right-hand side that 75% of our loans were between $25,000 and $500,000. So we kind of specialize in the small loans, micro loans for business owners. This is one of our success stories. Brock is a veteran and a local small business owner in Citrus Heights, and he worked with one of the consultants, this guy actually, David Dougal, and helped him put together his financials and his projections, and then he was able to get some capital infusion to start his business. So great story. These are kind of the success stories that we have within our organization. All right, so here you go. Here's David Dougal.
Thank you. So I'm going to go over today financial planning strategy, and basically I'm going to cover 4 critical reports that whether you're either pre-venture or an existing business you should be aware of: the balance sheet, profit and loss statement, break-even point, and cash flow, and some strategies as to what you should have and be ready to present.
Balance sheet, P&L statement, what?
Break-even and cash flow. Now, before you get going, obviously, both pre-venture and existing businesses require a lot of research, a lot of planning, so you need to make sure you have itemized and can defend all the costs involved in getting your business going. So we're thinking about all the equipment you're going to need and what it's going to cost. If you're going to carry inventory, how much and what it's going to cost. You should be thinking about marketing, advertising, other soft costs involved in your business. And again, anything additional you want to have documented, and you should be able to support most everything that you document, whether it's through quotes or invoices or things like that from outside sources. What needs to be in your financial plan, we just briefly talked about. The assumptions that you're making to support your business, again, either pre-venture and or existing, and being able to defend those assumptions. You're going to need a balance sheet, both starting and after each year of business. Typically, you'd want to prepare 3 years of projections. You want a profit and loss income statement for 3 years, monthly for the first year, probably monthly for the second year, depends on who you're presenting to. And the third year typically can be quarterly. Break-even analysis we'll talk about. Cash flow projections are extremely important. It's much more important than somebody just said they had cash flow problems. Are you going to testify? Okay. Cash. And some business ratios that we'll talk about also. You want to make sure that you're able to project the timeliness of your expenses. You're going to want to be able to explain any debt, whether it's going to be added, retired, or existing. And again, explain any major elements in making your plan, your assumptions again. So, the balance sheet. Does everybody know what a balance sheet is? Yes? No?
Yeah.
It's probably, based on my experience with over the past 10 years, it's probably the most neglected report for small business owners. Most of them don't understand it. They don't understand the impact of it. But the balance sheet to be very simple about it, is what do I own, assets, minus what do I owe, liabilities, equals net worth or equity. So this applies to your personal life as well as your business life. For example, if you go out and buy a $300,000 house and take out a $200,000 mortgage, you own $300,000, you owe $200,000. Your equity, or the worth of that house to you, is $100,000. Again, the assets will equal liabilities plus net worth. And that's basically the same equation as assets minus liabilities equals net worth. Assets typically are on the left-hand side of the balance sheet. Liabilities are on the top right-hand side. Equity is on the bottom right-hand side. So, an example. Assets and liabilities are split between current and fixed or long-term. So your current assets typically are things that you own that will be converted, are either cash or will be converted to cash within a year. The typical items that you'll find in your current assets are obviously cash, because cash is already cash. Accounts receivable is monies owed you by your customers, your clients, that will be converted to cash, hopefully within a year. And inventory is the other big current asset. Inventory are goods that you purchase to produce sales. And then the thought behind that is that inventory will be converted into a sale, which may be converted into an accounts receivable, which eventually will be converted into cash. I'm sorry.
On a cash basis, not on an accrual basis.
Well, we could get into cash versus approval if you like. Under cash basis accounting, typically you wouldn't have receivables,
Right.
but you would have inventory. But I don't want to muddy the waters too much on cash versus accrual. If anybody's interested in that, would probably be a nice consulting session.
Well, QuickBooks will do either.
Yeah, QuickBooks can do either. You determine that going in. It's important that you get advice before you determine that, because you can't switch back and forth between cash and accrual. The IRS does not like that. 1 year you're cash, next year you're accrual. That kind of upset. Long-term or fixed assets are things that you own that will not be converted to cash typically within a year, like machinery, land, real estate. Long-term, you're going to hold it for a while. So between your current assets and your long-term or fixed assets, you end up with total assets. The liability section is also split under the same lines as the asset section. Current liabilities are monies that you owe that will be paid within a year, like accounts payable, sales tax payable, payroll taxes payable. And long-term debt are things that you owe that will not be paid off in full within a year, like mortgages and notes payable. The difference between the two is your equity. And your equity typically is, you've got a couple of different categories. The first, owner's equity, is your original investment. Retained earnings are the cumulative amount of earnings that you have generated up until, but not including the current year. And then typically you would have net income for the current year, and the three of those categories together equals your total equity. If there's any questions at all, just spit it out. You don't need to raise hands or be formal. So that's your balance sheet, basically. Your goal when you're setting up your bookkeeping or accounting systems or whatever you're working on is to keep it as simple as possible, but at the same time make sure it's giving you the information you need to run your business. So you could run General Motors with just 2 accounts, assets and liabilities, but it wouldn't tell you where your assets were, wouldn't tell you where your debt was. So you kind of have to break it out. That is the balance sheet. The second one that everybody's interested in is the income statement or the profit and loss, which very simply is what did I earn, what were my revenues, what were my sales, minus what did I have to spend to generate those sales, or your expenses. So revenues minus expenses equals, this is a question you guys have to answer. Revenues minus expenses equals,
Profit.
I heard it,
Profit.
yeah, income, or
Loss.
if it's not income, what is it?
Loss.
The four-letter L word, which we don't like, right? So if you spend more than you take in, you lose. You spend less than you take in, you win. Doesn't get too much simpler than that, right? Except, of course, you want to spread it out a little bit and understand what's going on. So, it's going to tell you if you're profitable. Let me go back 1 second. The balance sheet report is always a snapshot. It's as of this nanosecond, this is what I own, this is what I owe, this is what I'm worth. Whereas the income statement is always over the period of time which basically you determine. It's my profit and loss from the first of the month to the end of the month. It could be your profit and loss from the beginning of the morning to the end of the day, quarterly, annual, but always over a period of time. So, I noticed one error. I want you to just scratch out items sold but not yet paid for, because that's not part of your income statement. But obviously, you're going to need your income statement when it comes time to pay your taxes, as disagreeable as that may seem. But I would urge you to think that paying taxes is a good thing because, that's a question, guys. Why would paying taxes be a good thing?
You made money.
Yes. Would tell you made money, right? If you weren't paying taxes, you're doing one of two things. You're either, yeah, or losing money, or cheating horrendously, right? Yeah.
So your taxes can serve as a substitute for your balance sheet in a way?
I'm sorry.
So your taxes can serve as a substitute for your balance sheet in a way?
No. Nope, they're two completely segregated reports. Usually part of your tax calculation will include a balance sheet, but you need both your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement to accurately prepare your taxes. The other thing to remember is, depending on how you're doing your books, you may give your records to your tax guy. He may go through and do his tax magic stuff and come up with a different result. But don't worry about that. That's why you pay tax guys. And again, we'll talk about this in a little bit. You can be profitable, but not have the money to pay bills. So, any questions on the income statement? Profit and loss statement? A couple of things. The way this is set up, we have revenue, which basically would be all your sales. Then we have a category called cost of goods sold, which is also known as COGS. And your cost of goods, and it's important to segregate that from your operating expenses, because your cost of goods sold is the money you're spending directly related to generating revenue. It's a variable expense. The more revenue you generate, the more you're going to have to spend on cost of goods. So you want to make sure you segregate those, because the difference between revenue and cost of goods gives you gross profit. And gross profit, you'll see, we use down the road to calculate different things. So from your gross profit, then you have to take into account your operating or your fixed expenses. Fixed expenses, by definition, are monies that you're spending basically to keep the doors open. They're ongoing, repetitive expenses: rent, utilities, insurance, things like that. So again, we start with revenue, we take out cost of goods, we have gross profit. From gross profit, we have to deduct our operating expenses, and the result is either income or we're back to the four-letter L word, loss. Any questions on that? And again, I would just urge you to make sure you segregate your cost of goods sold.
When you break down your cost of goods, let's say your pictures, you get itemized the flour and all that stuff that goes into that, or just listed as what?
Well, that again, when I said earlier, you want to keep your accounting records as simple as possible, but make sure it gives you the information you need. So if it were important to you to know that how much you're spending on flour, sugar, and yeast, then you would have different categories for that. But if you didn't care, you would just say it's a pastry material, pastry ingredients. But again, if you want to know how much you're spending on flour, then you would want to itemize flour.
Just concerned as to whether or not I need to be detailed, how detailed oriented the statement should be, or can it just be?
In a situation like that, what can be a flaw is when your costs of your flour and sugar and stuff go up, but maybe you figured out like early on in the year and
Yeah.
didn't adjust. That's
You
where
haven't-
you would get into trouble.
Yeah.
As a lender, I can tell you that that would be fine. I don't care how much the flour cost, but as a owner, you definitely would want to track that in a subcategory. You don't have to report it on the income statement, but for your own purposes, you want to be able to click on it and say, wait a minute, why is my cost of goods sold so much higher now? And if it breaks down, you know, oh yeah, that's right, the flour and sugar have gone up tremendously in the last couple of years. And you can really be able to compare, and it wasn't necessarily that you weren't selling enough or, you know, your other stuff was in line. It was just that sugar, which is a variable expense.
And if you're using, how many people are using QuickBooks or plan to use QuickBooks?
I had an extensive.
Too many. QuickBooks is kind of the Bible for small business accounting. And within QuickBooks, you could have a category, cost of goods sold, but then you could have a subcategory for flour, sugar. You can run different reports. It's an extremely powerful program. Again, you want to keep it as simple as possible, but make sure you're getting the information you want and you need to run your business. The key to QuickBooks, I'm not a QuickBooks salesman, is in the setup. If you're not comfortable with it, pay somebody to set it up, and after it's set up, basically it just becomes data entry. Any questions at all on the income statement? Two things that are most critical for small business owners. The first is break even, and the second is cash flow. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Basically, what are they? How do you do it? Why are they important? How do they affect your business? The first one we're going to look at is break even. What's the definition of break even?
No gain, no loss.
Pretty close.
You've covered your expenses.
Yeah.
You're winning.
No,
At least treading water.
At break even, you're even.
Yeah.
You're neither winning nor losing.
But you didn't lose.
You haven't lost is the good news, but you haven't won yet either. Break even is that point where you are income neutral. You're neither making money nor losing money. You have broken even. Why is that important? Especially for a startup business. Why would you care about break even if you're starting a business?
Because the things that you've been doing, the policies that you've put together are working.
Yeah?
It can also help you make decisions as to whether to go buy something else or look at what you're doing to see what you can change to make more positive aspects.
Which should always be an ongoing thing.
Right, exactly.
It's a progress report.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
The business can't survive without it.
Yes, and, well, we'll see it shortly, but what happens, before you break even, what's happening?
You're a loss.
Yeah, you're losing money. You haven't reached that point where you are breaking even.
You need to know if you need to sell 6,000 pastries or 5,000.
Yep.
Or
Or you
10,000.
also need to know if you can afford to spend $3,000 to do it,
Yeah.
and if you have to spend $4,000, that may not be good.
There's bakery in Coloma that was putting their day-old pastries in a plastic container. And she discovered that when she put them in the plastic container to sell them the next day, she was actually losing money on them, even though they were day-old pastries. So she would
How's that possible?
She would put 3 or 4 of them in a plastic container. The
Yeah.
plastic container was costing more than she was selling.
Oh, it was a reusable,
Right,
or a one-time use plastic.
right.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Mine was-
She must have been charging way too less for the daily stuff. Couple of ways to look at break even. Graphically, the red line are your fixed expenses. This is a very simplified graphic presentation, but your fixed expenses, typically the assumption is they're not going to increase or change on a month-to-month basis. If you're starting from scratch, the green line is revenue. The blue line is total expenses. So obviously the difference between the blue line and the red line are going to be your cost of goods sold or your variable expenses. And at some point in time, your total expenses equals your total revenues, and you have broken even. But what's happening before you reach that? We're back to the 4-letter L word again. And after that point, you're starting to make money. This will vary from company to company. There is no, set in stone or predefined break-even point. A good example is Amazon. Amazon, I don't even know if Amazon is profitable yet, but Amazon for years and years and years lost money. And they lost money because they just kept taking whatever revenue they generated and reinvesting it, creating more expenses. Revenue would go up, but their expenses would be more. I don't know, Scott, do you know if Amazon's profitable yet?
I'm sure they are.
No,
They generate
They're not.
I
max
don't think
revenue.
so. They talked about it one quarter and their stock shot up tremendously that they were actually gonna
Maybe
start making a
make
profit,
money.
but then they didn't do it.
So how does Amazon survive? They convinced people to continue to invest money in their company based on their business model.
Are you saying that's good or bad or indifferent?
It's indifferent.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. They can pull it off. Chances are anybody in this room cannot, unless our veteran administrator, finance guy is going to continue to pour money
It's
into
hard to
your
convince the
company.
bank to give you money if you have losses every year. I mean,
Well,
you
that's
gotta
given that
claim
you need
profits.
given that you need a loan,
Yeah,
but to reinvest in yourself isn't necessarily a bad thing if you have the
No.
cash.
no, it's
Okay.
good to
Not at all.
reinvest.
But you have to prove
Sure,
that there's an end goal in sight.
Right.
sure.
And again, you'd want to try as best you can determine how long it's going to take you, because that's going to have a big effect on how much money you need. Most small business owners are extremely good at figuring out how much it's going to cost to open the doors for their business. They know how much the rent's going to be, whatever starting inventory they need, whatever tenant improvements they have to make. But they don't take it one step further and look at their break-even point, because it's very rare that companies open on day one and are profitable. So how long is it going to take me to be profitable? And not only how long, but how much money is it going to cost me to be profitable? That's the purpose of break-even. If you want to figure it out mathematically, and these numbers tie into the profit and loss and the balance sheet that we looked at earlier, you take your the company we looked at, their break-even point was $49,245. And we calculated that by taking their fixed expenses, which were $26,000, and dividing it by their gross profit margin, which was 53% or 0.53. Gross profit margin you calculate by taking your gross profit, which was $40,000. I can go back. Okay, so we took our operating expenses of $26,000, right? divided it by our gross profit margin, which ended up being 0.3. Gross profit margin was 40,000 divided by 75,000. And that's how we came up with that magical number of $49,245. So, any questions on that? That's why you need to segregate your cost of goods sold or your variable expenses so you can come up with a gross profit. Take your fixed expenses divided by your gross profit margin.
Do you have an idea of what the average time allowance is, not allowance, but the average time it is for a startup business to hit this point? Is it like 2 years, or is there an average at all? Okay, just depends.
Just all depends.
Depends on
Depends on the industry.
Depends on the customer himself, the business owner, depends on the lender, depends on what they look for.
Too many variables to have an average.
Yeah, and to know actually yes or no, but yeah.
And again, it will be different for every company. Even companies within the same industry will have different break-even points depending, as Scott just mentioned, on how well the owner set it up, what kind of business it is. But it is critical, because until you reach break-even, you're losing money. So you have to plan for that. Most small business owners are really good at figuring out how much money it's going to cost to open the doors, but they don't take it one step further and figure out how much money they need until they start making money. So it has to be part of your startup expense budget. Any questions at all on break even? What else can you use break even for? Let's say you want to add a salesperson to your staff. What is your expense going to be the day you add a salesperson? Yeah, your expenses are going to go up. Just if your expenses were, if that was your expenses existing, if you add a salesman, what happens to your expenses? Immediately, they go up, right? If this was your revenue, what's going to happen to your revenue? Well, you're going to hope that it goes up, but is it going to go up immediately, the day you hire that salesperson? So you're going to have a little bit of time in here where you might be spending more than the incremental gain you're going to get from your salesman. I read something a while ago that when IBM hires a salesman, they don't expect that salesman to start breaking even for 18 to 24 months. Training, developing context within the industry, the sales process. I'm working with another client now who his business is he sells and sponsors fundraising projects for like high schools. So buy 10 tickets and get 3 footballs, whatever. But he's in the process, and he just acquired some money to expand his staff. He wants to add salespeople. He needs to train them. And the season is such that it doesn't really start until September. When school comes back into session and they're into the fundraising things at schools. So he's in this situation, right? Additional expenses, how long is it going to take him to break even? And we're going to spend a lot of time in the next couple of weeks figuring that out. Likewise, let's say you want to add equipment, you want to add a machine to your production facility. What's going to happen to your expenses the day you add the machine? Boom. How quick can you expect the efficiencies of that new machine to kick in? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? So you kind of need to figure out, when does this individual transaction break even? So 2 choices. How can you improve break even? You can either improve or raise your gross profit margin, right? By either creating more revenue, raising prices, and or reducing your variable expenses, your cost of goods. I am still astounded, after doing this for 10 years, how reluctant small business owners are to raise prices. And every time I ask people, when did you last raise your prices? They say, well, we've never raised our prices, it was 2 years ago, or there's always, it's never, well, we raise our prices every 6 months, we raise our prices every year. And then the next question I ask is, well, why haven't you raised your prices? And I just get a whole bunch of sob story whiners. My clients can't afford it, I don't live in a nice neighborhood, there's no money in my neighborhood, da. But, have your expenses gone up in the past year? Yes. If your expenses go up and you don't raise your prices, what happens? You're making less money and or losing money. So, as small business owners, please, please, please be cognizant of what you're charging and protect your price points. You should know what your competition is doing. If you're grossly underpriced in the market, pricing is a strange thing. If you're grossly underpriced, what's the perception from your clients? You're so cheap, you must not be good. Maybe. If you're at your competitor's level, that's okay. Sometimes, if you're above your competitors, the perception is, wow, he must really be good because he's charging a lot of money. So, pricing is very strange with a lot of psychological.
So I have a question. For the small business owners that had concerns about their faithful customer clientele and raising the prices, what is a method that they could use to increase prices but not drive those customers away that are already used to the pricing they've been giving over time?
Well, one would be education. I'm sorry, we reluctantly are raising our prices because our cost of labor just went up. What just happened in California?
Minimum wage just went up. It's expected to be.
Within 5 years, what's the increase going to be?
15.
Yeah, to $15. It's at 10 now. That's a 50% increase in your minimum wage labor. That's bunch. That's huge.
You got two variables involved in that. The employee, for one, who's currently making 10. Why in the heck, who can afford to wait until 2022 to make $15 an hour? And two, if I'm paying my employee now $15 an hour, how can I go back and start paying him minimum wage in order to survive this?
Well, that's part of the whole discussion on this minimum wage, and there's pros and cons to both of it. My first job many years ago was with GMAC, General Motors Acceptance Corporation. We were not union. When General Motors got a union raise, it was passed over to us. But what's going to end up happening is, just as you said, if you're paying somebody 15 now, and minimum wage goes up to 15, you're probably going to have to end up paying them 20. So it's got lots of ramifications. But again, you're kind of stuck with it, right? So your expenses go up, your prices almost have to go up accordingly. So one way, again, to improve break-even, obviously, is increase your gross profit margin, a combination of lowering your variable expenses and increasing your revenue. Don't be too reluctant to try and increase prices. There's not really, if you don't lose clients, there is no expense to increasing your prices. It goes straight to your bottom line. And the other choice is, obviously, if you can reduce your fixed expenses, that will improve your break-even point. Much easier said than done in a lot of cases, but something you should consider and pursue. Cash flow. If you leave with nothing at all out of this session today, please leave with the importance of cash flow. And I'm going to hammer it into you and hammer it into you. There's three things about cash flow. Number one, cash is king. Number two, you can be broke and profitable at the same time. Number 3, if you run out of cash, you are basically out of business. So what are the 3 things about cash flow? This is the first quiz.
Cash is king.
Cash is king.
You can be broken, profitable, be successful, and then out of cash, out of business.
Yep. So please write all those down and just put it in your head. Cash is king, broke and profitable at the same time, out of cash, out of business. So cash flow is basically a very simple formula. You have a starting cash balance. You project cash, and when I say cash, I mean hard dollars. I'm not talking about necessarily sales, because if you have sales and you also have accounts receivable, your sales do not equal cash, right? So cash is dollars out. Starting cash balance, cash out minus that, plus anticipated cash in equals ending balance. Typically, you do it on a month-to-month basis. I start the month with X, I anticipate X is going to come in, I'm going to lose Y, and I have an ending cash balance. And again, it's just hard dollars in and out of your business, not sales, not necessarily expenses. If you have expenses and you have credit terms from your vendors, then those expenses are not going to be part of your cash flow analysis. It's when you write a check, when you use a debit card. Cash in, cash out.
Question. Which one is financially feasible? I mean, I'm not trying to determine this for everybody, but let's take a coffee bar. Should I go in with purchases or go in with leasing equipment?
Oh.
I mean,
That's
for
all.
the first couple of years, I'm gonna be trying to break even.
Uh-huh.
And for the 3rd year, hopefully we'll start developing some profit. But if I purchase the equipment, that increases the amount of expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I rent the equipment, it's a continuous expense over a period of the 2 years that I'm trying to break in. But now, if I go out of business, then I return the equipment.
Well, maybe.
Well, that's what I'm looking at, lease or rent. But,
That becomes basically, it becomes a financial decision on your part, because you have to remember that lease is kind of a disguised financing.
Yeah.
So you just have to look at it and say, well, you actually have another choice you didn't mention, that's used. Buy used equipment. I mean, if you can buy a used, you're gonna probably need a commercial kitchen. If you can buy a used triple sink stainless sink, it's gonna be probably a half to 25% of the cost of new, and it'll last forever. So to answer your question, again, it just becomes how much money do you have available, how much do you want to spend, what's the best alternative for me at this point. Leasing, just be careful, because leasing, you have to understand exactly what your lease agreement is. Is there residual value at the end?
do I own it at the end of
Maybe, maybe not. Do you want to own it at the end of the lease?
Yeah, well,
You're probably, if you're doing a computer for 3 years, you probably don't want to end it because it's going to be obsolete.
absolutely, right.
What about the concept of donations from sponsors or corporations through their overstocking or anything like that?
In
How
terms
do
of what?
as far as looking at your cash flow, right? If you can get donations or you can get things sponsored to you,
Mhm.
that's less cash flow that you're putting out.
Well, that would become, in the cash flow formula, that would become part of your cash in.
Cash in.
There is some outfits that I didn't really realize before that you could do it this way, because it just never entered my mind, but they'll take your business, if you know everything you're gonna need, you know you're gonna need supplies, equipment, computers, desks, some delivery vehicles, whatever you need, they'll get everything you need, one package payment, you pay for everything, on a lease to own, for all of it.
Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
I think in the other classes we went to, the experience was just to seek out leads for startup.
Yeah,
It
they
all
push for
depends.
it,
I mean, there's no, to answer your question, there's no The right answer is the one that works for you, and make sure you've considered all the alternatives. The whole purpose of putting business plans together is consider alternatives you haven't thought about, hopefully answer questions that you didn't think about. It's research, research, research.
The whole idea in mind, coming from me, is to hear from other people what they feel is the best option
Sure.
available. Because I'm thinking one way, and if I go with what I'm thinking, I could be making a very financial mistake versus listening to someone else, maybe
But that's-
considering the options.
That's one of the reasons you would, use our services at the SBDC, is to analyze it.
You get about
Scott?
30 minutes.
Oh, okay, we're in good shape.
Okay, cool. 25 minutes.
But, obviously, it's research, basically.
Yeah.
What's the best alternative for me? Leasing? Buy new, buy used, lease to own, lease to return. You've got a whole bunch of different options that you'd want to look at before you jump in and decide on.
Well, I brought up, so going to your point about wanting to hear from other people, I brought up donations, because I've been working to establish my network where I know enough people who are interested in what I'm doing and selling the point that I can say, do you have any used equipment that you would be willing to donate to me? And then if they're like, oh, we have the equipment, but we can't donate it, then I can go to the next level of saying, well, how much are you looking for? So that way you're starting with the concept of asking for something for free versus just throwing your price out there.
Yeah. Any other comments? So, what are the three things about cash flow?
Okay. Yeah, you broke and profitable, and now you're
cash,
out
not a
of business.
Okay, so far you guys are doing good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the main thing for me right now is timing for cash flow.
Sure,
I mean,
That's critical.
the most important.
okay, well, here's a good example of cash flow. What's Black Friday?
Biggest sale day of the year for retail.
All right, the day after Thanksgiving. Okay, cash flow is, Black Friday, when major retailers go
For Thanksgiving.
from black ink, they go from red ink. If you're losing money, typically on a professionally prepared income statement, your loss will be in red ink. When you turn to a profit, it becomes black ink. Black Friday is the theoretical day that major retailers go from red ink, black ink. And it is, I don't know, like the last week in October, the first week in November. But what does that effect have on a retailer's cash flow?
If a cash coming in.
But what happens for the first 10 months?
Nothing.
Cash is going out rapidly. It's
you
just
plan
running out
for
the
it.
door. And they're willing to gamble that they can lose money for 10 months and make it up in 2 months. And they willingly accept that risk and that gamble. But they need the cash to operate for 10 months, even though at the end of the year, hopefully they're profitable. So, profitable and broke at the same time? Yes. They're going to be profitable, but they're broke for the first 10 months, right? So it's critical. It is by far the biggest reason small businesses fail is lack of cash flow management or lack of cash, period. So, again, used to record and predict how cash, hard dollars, moves in and out of your account. How much money you either have or will not have. It's related to the profit and loss, but it's not going to tell you if you're profitable. It will not tell you what your sales are. It really will not tell you what your expenses are. But it's a realistic picture how much goes in and out. And again, different for every company, and it is by far the single most important assessment you can make. And I urge you to please take cash flow into consideration. And again, you can have very profitable companies that require huge amounts of cash to operate. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. How long does it take to start with the idea of a drug and bring it to market? 10 years? It takes years, years and years and years. All that money is going out from a cash flow standpoint. Nothing coming in. Leading cause of business failure, we talked about being profitable and broke. So this is a very simplified, I'm going to give you an example, a very simplified example of a physical therapist I was worked with that wanted to quit her day job and start her own business. So she had monthly expenses were $6,000 a month. Monthly revenues for the first 6 months were 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10. 90% of her clients were covered by insurance. She didn't get paid for at least 90 days. The other 10% paid when treated. Starting cash balance was $10,000. Does she have enough money to run her business? So if you were to look at her profit and loss on an accrual basis, her revenue, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, was $54,000. Expenses were flat at $6,000, $36,000. Her income, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, totaled $18,000. Not bad. You take 18, divide it by 54. Who has a calculator?
It's 33%.
Exactly?
Yeah, it's 1/3.
Okay. So she's got 33% return on her sales. That's pretty good. I'd be happy with that. But, so again, does she have enough money? Is $10,000 enough to run her business? Remember the assumptions we had.
All the expenses are listed.
Oh.
Depends on if she's cash or accrual.
Where
She's accrual.
this is accrual accounting.
Exactly.
Her
We
profit
don't
and
know.
loss is accrual.
And that's because it's invoiced and she's waiting on them to pay, correct? Right.
She doesn't get paid for 90 days.
So it's the first 90 days that she needs to be aware of, because then the insurance bill will start kicking in.
So does she have enough to run her business? So we can't tell, can we?
Right.
So let's look at her cash flow. So here's her starting cash balance, $10,000. How much money comes in month 1? Remember, only 10% is paid in cash. $700 comes in, how much goes out? $6,000. Her ending cash balance is $4,700. Ending month 1 becomes starting month 2. 47. How much came in the second month? Only $800. How much went out? 6. So within 2 months, she burned through her $10,000. She's negative $500 there. It gets worse and worse. So by month 4, she is $10,600 in the hole from a cash flow standpoint, and that's real money. Because the $6,000 went out every month to cover rent and salaries and all that other stuff. Finally, because I'm a little on the conservative side, and if insurance companies say they're going to pay you in 90 days, they're probably not going to pay you till 120. So finally, in month 5, she's starting to collect her receivables from month 1. So should she have started this business?
Well, unless you had more to start it with, because it's going to take you 6 to 8 months to start getting the profit.
But if she's making 33% return on her sales, right? That's pretty good. I'd be really happy if I could make consistently have a return of 33%.
She could relook at her clientele, so in the beginning, just look for patients that could pay out of pocket.
Yeah, that's one alternative. But if the industry norm is that 90% of PT is covered by insurance, is that realistic?
Target marketing.
Yeah, you could try. Is it realistic?
I'm optimistic.
So what's
But the more
your
revenue she
collective?
brings in, especially at the beginning, it just puts her further in the hole. There's still something you're missing.
Oh, no, it does, for sure. I mean, if she were to collect, instead of 7,000 the first month, if it was 9,000 the first month, then
Scott needs to get her a line of credit.
that's the answer. The answer is, of course, should have started this business because it's extremely profitable. The issue is $10,000 is not enough. She needs probably $25,000.
Short term.
But eventually this'll, I mean, it improves each month, and eventually she's gonna climb out of her cash flow deficit, but
That's always the case. Business owners always ask for a lot less than they really need.
well, yeah, because they don't know.
Well, they don't know. That's why they go see David Dugal. Cash King, right?
And we'll put together a package that Scott and Mike cannot deny. I mean, it'll be a perfect package. So, what's the conclusion? I think the conclusion is, she earned $18,000 the first 6 months, but she's woefully underfunded to start her business. As you saw, by February, she ran out of the 10 grand. By April, she was in the whole 10.6. So to go back to this, a couple of different ways you could do this to change it just a little bit. If we had said her starting balance was 0, then her worst possible position here would have been 20,600.
Right.
Now, of course, our projections, they never come out the way we think they are. So, if this starting balance here was 20,600, then that number would have been 0 right here.
Yeah.
But, we can't project it that accurately, so probably she wanted to start with about 25,000, maybe a little bit more.
Would that mean she
Because Scott would, put together a package in under 50,000, even though she only needs 25.
That's what I would do, yeah.
But
It's always
lenders-
the case.
lenders-
It's always the case. Lenders want you to ask for more than less.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a line of credit, you're only gonna draw on what you really need, so it's not
Yeah.
really costing anything extra. But it's important to have it available when you need it.
Well, otherwise,
Would you include the cost of repairs or
oh, sure,
Yeah.
that's gonna be one of your
It's gonna
projected
take cash.
expenses, maintenance costs, repair costs, equipment replacement costs. Computers, probably every 3 years, you're gonna want a new computer. Maybe not, but, some stuff has to be replaced.
those things are covered.
Wouldn't that also mean that we're looking to, not as far as ask the question of when is she going to start with a profit, when she starts breaking even, because you're not, perhaps if she had $25,000 to start to fund her business, she would have broke even by the 4th month.
Well, no, but break even and cash flow are really two different things. Cash flow, again, is not directly related to revenues and expenses, it's just money going in and out. Now, the relationship, would be if my revenues were $7,000 and 90% was receivables, the relationship is 90% of 7,000 from a cash flow standpoint, I won't see for 120 days. And likewise, if some of these expenses, if she had credit terms from her vendors, then some of these expenses, would be pushed over to the following month when she actually wrote the check for it. If that makes sense to everybody. So again, it's related to revenue and expenses, but they're two different things. It's cash flow is hard money in and out, and the 3 things about cash flow are okay. Everybody got that? So what's our conclusion? Yes, she should have done it, but she didn't have enough money to do it. Which is where credit lines come into play, borrowing comes into play, raising additional capital comes into play, but you have to know how much money you need to get your business started, from both a break-even standpoint and a cash flow standpoint.
So this may be like a really basic question, but is the game the same for nonprofit versus for-profits? Okay,
I mean, nonprofit does not mean you can't make money.
right.
You can't have a loss, continuing losses in a nonprofit. Nonprofit basically means, the designation is what do you do with the profits? Nonprofits have to make money. Because if you're operating a nonprofit at a loss, you're not going to be around much longer. Very long. Any questions at all on cash flow? And the three things are,
Cash is king, profitable,
Okay, no cash, no business.
okay,
What was number two?
broke and profitable at the same time. Because our physical therapist was broke, but she was profitable.
Does anybody know the number one reason why businesses fail?
overlooking the startup costs, underfunding yourself.
Lack of cash flow.
Cash flow.
You could have great experience, but if you got no cash flow, you're done. You could have no experience, but you've got great cash flow, you're probably gonna figure it out. But at some point, when the cash flow dies, the business dies, if you can't replenish it.
So it's up to the individual to continue to maintain various programs to generate cash flow.
Marketing,
Yes.
branding.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Credit terms, well, we're gonna go over that. So, we talked about improving break even, right? Reducing variable expenses, cost of goods, or increasing your gross profit margin by reducing cost of goods, reducing your fixed expenses. What choices do we have to improve cash flow? So, you only really have two choices to improve your cash flow. One, you try and accelerate the money coming in. And what are your options there? If you've got receivables and you should have credit and collection policies in place, you want to make sure that your credit and collection policies are being adhered to. I just had a client that had I'm trying to remember what her sales were, but 80% of her receivables were over 90 days old. And I yelled at her. I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, every quarter, every once in a while, I pick up the phone and I call my past due customers." No, not good. So make sure your credit terms are being met. You can offer discounts for early payments. Have you ever heard of the credit terms 2-10-30? That means you give a 2% discount if you pay within 10 days, otherwise you pay in 30. You can change your terms to COD if the industry will allow you to do it. You can charge late payments to discourage slow pays. If you can get arrangements set up with accounts payable departments, perhaps you can get extended credit terms and or maybe seasonal credit terms. And obsolete inventory. Everybody, I say, what's your inventory? And they say, well, I've got X amount of auto parts sitting on the shelf. And I said, no, you don't have X amount of auto parts on the shelf. You've got $10,000 in dollar bills sitting on the shelf. It's not inventory, it's really dollar bills. If you have obsolete inventory that you're not selling, discount it, get it the hell out of there, and convert it to cash. None of that is really going to give you much of a quick fix for cash flow. So, that's accelerate cash in. What's the other alternative?
reduce costs.
Slow down cash going out. So, if you're on COD with vendors, try and get credit terms. That'll slow down your cash going out. However, it's only a one-time pickup. If you can get 30 or 60 days credit terms, then the first 30 or 60 days of that cycle, you're not going to have cash out, but every month thereafter, you're going to have cash out. Make payments when due to avoid late charges. If you can take advantage of cash discounts, you want to kind of do the math and make sure the discount benefits you from a cash flow standpoint. Try and negotiate longer payment terms. Just-in-time inventory, everybody know what that is? It was kind of the big contribution from the Japanese industrial world. Whereas the Toyota's going down the assembly line and it's time to put the wheels on. The wheels are coming in the other side of the factory, delivered by the wheel manufacturer just in time to put them on the car, and the car continues on
So you're
down the
not
road.
paying.
So you don't have inventory.
It's not on your shelf.
Yeah, you don't have inventory. And buy only what you need. So I would urge you, when you're looking at purchasing things, to consider the very simple, is this item a want or is it a need? You're always going to have a few wants, but are your wants really needed? So try and stick with the needs, not the wants. Okay, so the things we just talked about really do not dramatically improve cash flow. There's no simple answer. The answer is you need to have the money. So the three things are, for the last time,
No cash, out of cash, out of business.
yes. Okay, a couple of business ratios, and there's a gazillion of them, but these three are probably the most critical. And kind of guys like Scott, they kind of look at these ratios and they say, well, we kind of want to know just a little bit about these. So, current ratio, if we go back to our balance sheet, the current ratio is very simply my current assets, 48,000, divided by my current liabilities, 9,000. Who's got a calculator? 48 divided by 9 equals
5.5.
5.5. So what does that mean? That means for every dollar of current debt, this company has $5.50 of current assets. Very, very strong current ratio. If you're a company that's carrying inventory, 2 to 1 is kind of an acceptable ratio. If you're not carrying inventory, like 1.5 to 1. Not listed on the slide is another ratio called the quick ratio, which is very similar to the current ratio, except you delete and subtract inventory from the current assets. And bankers kind of like to look at that also. The second one that you should be aware of is debt to equity. And that is wrong. I'm sorry. Scratch out assets and put equity on your handout. So debt to equity is total debt divided by total equity. So if we go back to our balance sheet, and find my balance sheet. So total debt was 41,000 divided by total equity 32 is how much there, Scott?
So, I'm sorry,
41 divided by 32,
1.25.
1.3?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does that mean? No, 2 to 1, not 1.2.
1 to 2.
32 divided by 41.
It's 0.75.
0.75.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. So again, you take total equity, 32, divided by total debt, 41, comes out to 0.75. What does that mean? That means for every dollar of debt, this company has 75 cents worth of equity. If you were a lender, would you be happy with that? And why wouldn't you be?
You're still considered lower than what you need.
Yeah, what does that really mean though? If I only have 75 cents of equity worth for every dollar of debt I owe, what is that telling you, or what is that telling a lender?
You'll have a hard time paying back that loan.
Yeah, you can't cover,
There's no
can't
cash.
cover your debt with your equity. You owe more than you're worth. Now, if you're an owner of that company, you might be happy with that because you're leveraging your money. But if you were a lender, you probably wouldn't be overly thrilled. That's why it said $2 of equity for every dollar of debt in the presentation. The final one basically is return on investment, which is, again, our equity, $32,000, and our income, which in this case I think was $14,000. 14 for the year. So net profit 14 divided by equity, which was what, 32? 42. 14 divided by 32 is what? This calculator over there.
14 divided by 32?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
28.
Point,
yeah.
Point what?
point 43.
43? Okay. So their income was 43% of their equity. So they invested and got back 43 cents on every dollar they invested, and that was just for the year. So I'd be pretty happy with a rate of return of 43%. Because if you put your equity into the bank today, you'd probably get about 0.75%. Because now there's a whole bunch of other ratios that you can measure: inventory turnover, you can measure accounts receivable turnover, there are all kinds of different things you can measure. I would keep these in mind because if you're looking to borrow money down the road, your current ratio is extremely important to lenders, and debt to equity is important to lenders.
What was the ideal figure you said for debt to equity?
Well, they would want total debt of 1 and equity of 2, which is kind of strong. But. And remember to scratch out assets on your slide and please put in equity. That pretty much concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions at all? Anything? If not, I hope that helps you. I would urge you to please keep the Small Business Development Center in mind. It by far is the best kept secret in the small business world. I wish I had known me when I had my own business because I would have used me and abused me and taken advantage of me. But I didn't know me when I had my own business, so now you guys know me and our services, so use and abuse us. That's our motto, use and abuse. And if that's it, I thank you very much for your attention and your attendance, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
All right, so Dave specializes in what? Come on, cash flow, right? Okay. I specialize in accessing capital, so getting the money, finding the lenders. We have a couple lenders in the room today, so I'll talk about them a little bit later. One of them's going to come up and speak for a little bit because he does only veteran loans, which is awesome and new, and it started in January. There's been some really cool incentives for veterans to buy a home, but I haven't seen anything on the business side for forever, really, except for maybe some fees that they dismiss on the SBA side. But this program is really cool, so we'll get to that. I'm not going to have you recite the 3 things about cash flow, but there's one more, Dave, that you missed. The fourth one, and it rhymes. If the cash doesn't flow, the loan doesn't go. Okay?
Okay.
That's the end of my presentation. Okay, so where to start for getting access to capital? So you can start several different ways. I would strongly recommend, and a little bit of bias since I'm from the SBDC, Now, you don't go to your bank if you're looking for capital for a business. I'd recommend that you go to either the SBDC or SBA or SCORE, or maybe a CDC, Community Development Corporation, which we'll get to a little bit later. But within that, the reason why is we're the experts. We guide you, we counsel you, we consult you, and we know where to find the money. And we know it's not, depending on where you bank and what industry you're in, your bank may not feel comfortable to lend to your industry. They may not like retail, they may not like gas stations, they may not like manufacturers. So really important that you come to SBDC, kind of massage your financials a little bit, and see where's the best avenue for you to go. It may be a bank, it may be a credit card, it may be a nonprofit loan, it may be money from your friends, families, and your fools, right? That's all everybody says. So here's some ways that you can grab money or get money for your business. So you can get it given to you. You can have an investor give it to you, which you have to give up part ownership of your company. So there's debt financing and there's equity financing. I specialize in debt financing, and I don't recommend business owners to give up ownership of their company. And you do have to remember, if you do give up ownership, I recommend that you give up under 20%. Because anything over 20%, they would have to be personally guaranteed on the loan, and they would have to give their financials. So just FYI, if you do want to give up part ownership or want to sell your company. So there's different ways to get it. You can get it through 401k, line of credit. We talked a lot about lines of credit earlier. Or you can buy it. Oh, sorry, you can buy money. Or you can borrow it from a loan or from a bank. Yeah.
How about crowdfunding?
Yes, we'll get to that. You're jumping ahead, man.
All right.
So this is where we can help you out. This is the 5 C's of credit. I'm not sure how many of you have heard the 5 C's of credit. Cool, just a couple. Awesome. So maybe Dave in the back. Yeah. So this is how you break down your credit, which is your FICO score. Your business doesn't generally have a business credit score. It really only, some of you may hear that out there, that your LLC or C Corp or S Corp may have a business score. A business credit score is not true. Like, you can't run your TransUnion, Equifax to find your business credit score. It just depends on the industry that you're in, your NAICS code, your SIC code, your industry code, and then how risky you are, and some other things on top of that. That will generate a business credit score. So the 5 C's credit, this kind of just breaks down what tells you about your credit in general, how you treated it over the last, since you were 18, since you got your FICO score. And it talks about the capacity of it, how much credit you have, so it's great if you have $50,000 outstanding that you can use, how much have you utilized, capacity. And then the collateral, so what do you own within that? So if you have a home, you have a car, anything that is a liability. And then, any questions on this? So accessing capital. So as a consultant with the Small Business Development Center, I specialize in taking your story, your passion, your pitch, your idea, your financials, if you have any, if you're an existing business. So I look at four key areas when looking at a business and working with them to help them get cash or get a loan or get financing, in whichever way. So we talked earlier a lot about lines of credits. When you're a business owner and you're starting your business, it's almost impossible to get a line of credit because banks don't like to give unsecured lines of credits available. If you have a home and you have equity, I strongly recommend that you start there. It's the easiest, fastest way to get financing. Technically, you're not supposed to take cash out of your home to start your business, so I wouldn't tell the bank that. But you can do it, and everybody does it, right? A bunch of people take out cash to buy boats and cars and all that good stuff. But the reason why it's the cheapest is usually it's stated income, it's easier to get, and the rates are really low. They're based off prime, so the rates are between 4% and 5% technically, so it's really easy to get. But I start with a strategic plan, also known as a business plan. I'm not a big fan of the 30-page business plans that are out there. I'm more of a fan of like maybe a 5 to 10-page business plan. That's very concrete and really detailed into what you're really going to do. Not a lot of fluff text. Depending on your industry, if you're a tech industry or you have intellectual property, you might get away with a pitch deck, which is a PowerPoint, very similar to this. Like who you are, what your product is, why you're selling it, why you're the best person to sell it, why you're selling it at this time, kind of explain it real quick if you're going to pitch it to somebody and they were going to invest in you. A pitch deck could be used for investors. It could also be used for banks too, right? Because they're going to be lending to you. We talked about what lenders and investors need to know from you, kind of setting the expectations up front before you go in and talk to a lender, what you should know, what they should know. Put together your financial loan package, and then it may not be best for you to get a loan from a bank. A bank may not fund you. Banks traditionally decline about 70 to 80% of the loans that get submitted. And the reason why they do that is they're just kind of going through the motions, taking an application, throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? They're not really having a real conversation with you like we are, or like that Mike would have, or Andy would have, and really understand your business, your structure, and find out if it makes sense for you to apply for the loan. So we work with financial institutions. We work with credit unions, banks, alternative lenders, nonprofit lenders, some kind of hard money lenders, and this is what we do for them. We meet with their clients, and you guys would all become clients. We organize your financials, make sure that you're loan ready for the best lending program, whether it be a home equity line of credit out of your house, or a credit card, or a car loan secured to your car. We educate them on how to manage their business. Dave does that, as well as some of our other consultants. And then we don't want to just see you one time. We want to see you 3 times, 6 times, 12 times, kind of. And then some clients need to go longer than that, but we don't like to just see you once and then tell you good luck. So yes.
When you say preparing financials, you prepare financials on what ground? See that you don't have anything to show for it, like your business not even off the ground yet.
Yeah.
So where do you draw those financials from?
So we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, great question though. And you guys keep it interactive. You guys ask questions as we go along. This is what you need to ask yourself. Some of these questions. There's obviously a lot more than 7 questions, but because when you go and apply for a loan and they say that you're approved, they usually give you a condition list of like 20 things that you need to give to them before they actually give you the money. So getting approved for a loan is very different than getting funded for a loan, right? Funded would mean cash in the bank. Most time banks could technically approve you in like 2 days if they know what they're doing. But big banks have to go through so many different channels. The person that you talk to doesn't have the decision to make on if they're going to approve your loan or not. They're not underwriting it. They're a salesperson. They're going to kind of collect your information and give it to maybe a different state, and how big the bank is. But there's some non-traditional lenders, non-bank lenders that'll, like Mike back here, he'll tell you like in 2 days if you're approved or not. And then after that, you need to get the financials. We'll go over that. Keep these in mind. You know, you really need to know realistically how fast you need the money. So if you needed it yesterday, you're not going to get it. You need to be realistic, right? Most traditional bank loans take anywhere between 30 and 90 days to get financing. I've seen them done quicker, 2 to 3 weeks, but you have to have everything with you. You have to have like that Bible of financials that you have in your box somewhere, in your house, in your basement. So you need to have all those together, and then say, hey, and then your credit needs to be good, and you need all their other conditions, right? But majority, it takes about 30 to 45 days to get financing. So kind of make that as a preparation, expectation that you know up front. If you're in business and you do need it tomorrow, just know that you're going to pay a lot of money for it. So the cost of funds will go up. The faster you need it, the more it costs. The slower you need it, the less it costs, right? Yeah. So really important for you to know how much money you need and what you're going to do with it. So it's not good to go to a bank and say, well, I can just give me whatever you can. You know, I want you to approve me for whatever I can get approved for. And that's number 1, they're not going to take you serious. Number 2, you don't know what you're talking about. And number 3, it's not really in your business plan to just take whatever, obviously, because then you have to pay it back. So and then know what you're going to do with it. I need 50 grand. I'm going to spend 10,000 on a website. I'm going to hire somebody for 15,000. I'm going to do some. I'm going to get some equipment for 5,000. Kind of break it down. Know what you're going to use it for. Really important to know how you're going to pay it back. So if you're starting a business, the projections that you have, they're profit and loss, and hopefully you're making a profit, right? So you asked a question earlier, like, how long is it to when you make a profit? If you're not making a profit after the first year on your projections, then really why start your business, right? But there is no specific parameters around that, like how long. But that's kind of what they look at. And those are the questions that the banks would ask you. But so how are you going to pay back the loan? So the projections that you make up, because they're all made up numbers, right? Because you haven't done it yet. They're all pro forma. You kind of just throw it out there. They're not going to count that profit as income to pay back the loan or as cash to pay back the loan. So you have to have some sort of other way to pay back the loan. So that's what they look at. So you can't really start a business with no way to pay back the loan if you don't have. And we'll go into that a little bit further. So it's really important to know how long you've been in business, and know if your bank finances startups. A lot of banks don't finance startups. Startup would obviously be between, well, if you start a business today, you'd be a startup, right? If you've been in business in 3 months or something like that, 6 months, and you have historicals through your cash flow and stuff, then you're in business. Some banks will finance businesses that have been in business 0 days, 6 months, 12 months, 18, and 24. So you have to really know your bank and then see what they classify as a startup. It's all different, unfortunately. What type of
The SBA classifies it as 24 months or less. It's still a startup.
Okay, thank you very much. So, what type of collateral? So that's what you own. That's one of the C's. What's your worth? What are you worth? So you take what you own minus what you owe. That's your equity. That's what you're worth. Dave talked about that a little bit. And then what's your credit story? So, there you go. So education for score versus story. So score is one thing, right? But if you're not able to explain what your the story is behind it, then you may or may not be able to get a loan. So, hey, I have an example. I have a 650 credit score. I had a bankruptcy 3 years ago. I have some cash in the bank. And the reason why I had a bankruptcy is because I had some crazy medical bills and all that good stuff. There's some things that you can lie about on an application. There's some things that you can't. I probably shouldn't tell you that. This stuff right here, you can't lie about because they're going to find out. So very important when you go into and talk to a bank or a lender and say, hey, this is my credit score. This is why it's my credit score. Because they're going to ask for it anyways. They're going to ask why you have bankruptcy, why you have foreclosures, why you have a short sale, why you have a tax lien. So they want to know up front, and they're going to find out. That, and if you're a felon, they're going to find that out too, regardless of what age you were. If you're 5, if you're 10, they're going to find it out. But, so really important to come up front. The reason why I mention that is SBA has a form called 912, it's a felony form. And if you, when you filled out the paperwork in the first day, and you didn't fill out that you had a felony like 30 years ago for some weird thing, it'll kill the deal. You won't be able to get your loan approved. It's really sad. Happens pretty often, actually.
So how much do student loans truly affect your ability to obtain a loan for your startup business?
If you're delinquent on them, it really affects it. If you're not delinquent, it doesn't really affect it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the financial loan package. So this goes back to your question, Mr. Greenshirt. Goes back to your question as far as, what's your name?
Royce.
Royce, cool. Like what kind of financials package would you get together and everything? So if you're an existing business, it's really easy. It's almost like if you're an existing person and you're trying to buy a home. Yeah, it's the same thing, right? You need all these financials, last couple years of tax returns, your interim financial statements. Dave talked about that. So today is April 8th. So January 1st, April 8th of 2016 would be your year-to-date interim. I get a pulse of how you're looking. Your personal business financial statement, the application, obviously. If you're starting a business, so you wouldn't have any of this, right? Because you don't have any historicals. So if you're starting a business, so this is very important to know. So if you're starting a business and you're going to keep your W-2 job, then they would ask for your taxes, your personal taxes, to apply for the loan. If you're not keeping your W-2 job, they're not really necessarily going to ask for it. If you're keeping your job, you would need your 30-day pay stub, obviously a personal financial statement, and then this is your projections, which over here would be like your historicals. But since you're just starting, you would need 2 years, at least 2 years worth of projections, and we can help you with that at SBDC. And it has to be month by month. It can't be in 2016 I'm going to do $4 million, and in 2017 I'm going to do $8 million. It has to be month to month. And then your pitch deck or your business plan, strategic plan. So these, and then if you're buying a business, it'd be a merge of the two. you would need the existing business's financials for the previous year. Excuse me?
And then your personal.
And then your personal, if you're gonna keep your job or if you, whatever you have, your personal net worth, all that stuff.
Now, is that your actual personal taxes, or do you have to fill out the form for them to get transferred?
It's your actual personal taxes. So they have you send in your actual personal taxes, and then they have you sign a 4506T form, which asks the IRS to just make sure that your taxes are correct. Yes.
Your pitch deck, that's who your competition is?
No, that's what we talked about earlier. Kind of like your quick business plan, that your PowerPoint slide, like who you are, like who your like who you are, what's your product, why you're selling it, how you make money.
So what's the benefits of keeping your job versus not keeping it if you're planning to start a new business for the loan?
Oh, it's really, really exciting to a banker and a lender if you keep your job.
Okay.
At least for like 3 to 6 months. Only because they can count on that income to pay back the loan. Right? So a $50,000 loan at 10 years at 6% is $600 a month. So if your business is brand new and you make more than $600 a month in your job, you don't have that many more other liabilities.
Guaranteed income.
Excuse me?
It's guaranteed income.
It's guaranteed income that can pay back the loan. You can service the debt from day one without even starting your business or counting on your projected income. So really important if you guys keep your job for 3 to 6 months. Not always the case, obviously, because it doesn't always work out. But so your personal financial statement. So this is one of the forms that you would need to fill out to in your financial package. So SBA, you can go to sba.gov, and this is their Form 13, 413 form. This is a very condensed version of it, just like Dave has some condensed versions of some things. So you have your assets, what you own, it's all your value, what you owe, your liabilities, it's all your debt, and then the difference is your net worth, is your equity, right? So some CPAs charge money to put these together. You can, like I said, the 413 form is really easy to fill out, and sometimes the lenders will hold your hand and help you with that. Just FYI, they don't get paid to do that, so they're not really supposed to do that for you. That's what the SBDC is for. They can help you with that. Help you understand it. So this person is worth $56,000. They have some negative equity in their car, which happens. They have some positive equity in their house, which is great. The SBA banks love to take equity on that. And then sometimes this holds value, sometimes not, like the jewelry and then the credit card student loans. So.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So is it better to purchase your home first before trying to get a loan for your small business, or
That's a really good question. So it's funny because it comes up all the time. I would strongly recommend that you start get a business loan before you get a home loan.
okay?
But not always the case, right? Because if you're in escrow and you're applying for the loan, you're going to sign tomorrow, but you want a business loan, you might as well sign it, right? But then it also depends if your mortgage is going to be more than your rent. So when you fill out a business application, if you're renting and it's $1,500, but you're going to buy a home and it's $1,200, then it really wouldn't matter, right? Because you're decreasing your cash flow.
I wanted to comment on that. As a lender, if you don't have a huge mortgage, that does give you more flexibility. And I think that's a good thing, because you don't have this, you could always move to a cheaper place, but, if you're stuck in a mortgage, then, that's kind of a fixed cost, you really can't do much with that. Now, if you just started a business and then you go to apply for a home loan, they're probably gonna say you're not qualified, because you haven't been in your job long enough to make that happen. So, but I would prefer as a lender to not see a big mortgage there when you're just starting a house. You don't want to incur any additional debt right before you're about to apply for a business loan. Yeah, that goes for cars, or leases, anything.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
So projections. Projections, you'll find that it's very similar to a P&L statement, that income statement that Dave was talking about. And so really important that you know this. This is obviously a condensed version of it. Cost of goods and then pay, whatever that. So your sales revenue forecast, where it's coming from. If you're retail, what's your sales price per unit, your cost per unit. Are you seasonality? Yes.
I'm not too educated on equity inside your home, but I want to know, well, some of the reasons why people want to get a loan for their home is so they can right away strip the equity out of their home to fund their business as opposed to going to a bank?
Yes. So yeah, it's the equity in the home is all right. So if you
You're thinking like a home equity line.
yeah, so if you home equity line of credit, yeah. So if you if your cash flow is tight and you're not going to be able to get approved on a business loan sense, if you're starting your own business, which is risky in itself and enough, right? Just to start a business, right? And banks are very leery of it. But yeah, pulling equity out of your home is sorry. Pulling equity in your home is the easiest, fastest way to do it. If you have, so most banks will allow you to go 80% loan to value. If your house is worth 100,000 and you owe 60,000, 80% of 100 would be 80. So if 80 minus 60 would be 20,000. So you'd be able to pull out $20,000. Does that make sense?
Just as opposed to getting a new house, you have new expenses now, as opposed to when you start a business, so as a lender, I would think looking at all the expenses you just acquired, you don't try to pay them back, like you're also trying to follow your business.
Oh, okay. You're saying that if you don't have enough equity in your home and you need a bigger loan than the equity that you have?
Yeah.
So you're asking?
Yeah.
Then yeah, I would say leave your home alone and go get a business loan.
I think.
So if you have $20,000 equity in your home and you need 50,000, then I'd recommend to go get a business loan. And then the lender, depending on how much equity you have in your home, some lenders won't take any equity if you have less than 25% equity in your home, 25% equity in your home, yeah. If you have, but some lenders will take the equity regardless of how much you have. Did I confuse you or?
No.
Alright, so that's your projections. Any questions on the projections? So the projections that I have here, it doesn't talk about cash flow. You have to take it one step further and go into cash flow, which obviously Dave helped you.
Can you explain the seasonality on that last? Was that just a form of saying that you have a past history of it?
No.
No, so if your industry and your business is
Okay.
seasonal, so if you sell Christmas trees
Okay.
and yeah, so you have a spike.
Summer,
Yeah,
winter. okay.
yeah.
Like
Got it.
ours for a campground's based on 180 days.
Yes, exactly.
And I
So
do that I work at a rafting campground and that's typically how long the raft is.
exactly. So you need to understand that. So if the amount of time that you bring in money is less than 360 days a year, or if you have a seasonality push like yours for 180 days, being able to explain that. So not just turn your projections in and say, hey, we don't make any money the first 9 months of the year, but we make money the last 3 months. But
So explaining why you're broke but profitable at the start of the year.
exactly, yeah. Explain. You need to have a narration to the numbers. Understanding the numbers is one thing, but then be able to explain it is another thing. But really important for you to know your numbers. So as I mentioned, it may be best for you to go to a bank, and it may be best for you not to go to a bank. There's alternative lenders out there. There's traditional bank financing, and as we all know, traditional bank financing, they talk a lot about, hey, your loans in underwriting. They want a lot of collateral. They really want more collateral than they really need, and they ask for a lot of collateral. They want a high credit score. They're very strict on this industry experience. So alternative lenders, they want to know how fast you want the money, how long you've been in business, because they do startups. Why do you need the money? Some alternative lenders go as low as 600 in credit score. Some go below 600, but it has to be an isolated incident. Like I got in a really bad car accident. Somebody hit me head on. I had $500,000 in medical bills. I wasn't able to pay it, and my credit score is 500. So unfortunately, banks don't make it really easy for business owners to get financing, like at all. You go in there and you ask them a point blank question, and they would say, "Well, it depends, right?" It's kind of case by case. You hear it all the time, right? Oh, it depends. So that's why you go to the SBDC. We can tell you when it doesn't depend. So I talked a lot about this, complementing the lending process. So this is what the SBDC does best. If it's traditionally, their banks were lending lots of money in, as you guys know, right? And we had the big crunch in like 2008, and the banks pulled back and they weren't lending any money. So when they weren't lending any money, there's a lot of these other alternative lenders that came up. They've been, most have been around for 30, 40, 50 years, but a lot of people didn't really know about them. There wasn't a lot of education on them. But there's some good ones and there's some bad ones out there. So really important for you to know. So there's community advantage loans. They're all over California. There's a couple companies that specialize in it, and they do loans between $25,000 and $250,000. They'll do startups. They do startup restaurants, which is crazy. Most people don't do that. And then they have some sort of cash injection that they ask for to do the loan. Within that, there's some community revolving loan funds. There's one in Sacramento, in Sac County, so it wouldn't be out here. Apologize for that. But in Sac County, if your business is in Sac County, there's a revolving loan fund. It's put up by the city of Sac, county of Sac, and SMUD put some money in, and they have some cool lenient guidelines, and they lend money out, which is really cool. There's transactional lenders that will not necessarily ask for a home. They'll just do a UCC filing. UCC is Universal Commercial Code. They'll just do a blanketed filing. So if you owned a business and it was in this room, and that's all the assets that you had, a UCC would be on the desk, on the computers, on the paper, and it doesn't matter if it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So there's banks that'll lend up to $300,000 and do a UCC filing on just this room, which the assets in this room would probably be worth like, I don't know, 25,000 maybe. But there's banks that'll do it, and you just kind of have to find them, and we have the resources for that. State guarantee loans, there's micro business loans that are out there. California Capital, anybody heard of them? So SBA, so big myth, SBA doesn't lend any money. They guarantee the funds that banks lend to you, anywhere from 75 to 90%, or 50% to 90%, depending on what you're buying. So SBA, if you go to a bank and they say you're declined, and they say SBA declined you, they're lying to you for the most part, unless you're a felon. But because some banks don't feel comfortable to lend the money to you regardless of SBA's guarantee for whatever reason. Either they don't understand the SBA or they don't do a lot of SBA loans. Or maybe they're afraid that SBA is not going to pay them back, because I think that happened at one time in history or a couple times.
They also might not be eligible for the SBA loan.
True. So
they don't meet the conventional policy for the bank.
Yes, and that's what they should say. They should say not that you're declined and SBA declined you. They should say that you're not eligible. So a nonprofit is non-SBA eligible. A lot of real estate companies are non-SBA eligible. So there's different eligibilities, and you can find that on SBA.gov, and we can help you with that too. All right, so when banks weren't lending, there's all these cool companies online that were created, Cabbage on Deck, LoanMe, etc. There's a bunch of them, right? So they're only cool because they give you money right away. They're not cool because they're not regulated. They're known as predatory lenders. They charge you anywhere between
74%.
Yeah, anywhere between 10% and over 100%. If you're really careful, they can essentially own your business in a month if you're not careful, and they can take you bankrupt. Super upside down cash flow. But they fund fast. Some borrowers can afford a 30% payments. Most can't, right? We see them all the time. I refinance a lot of them all the time. So be very careful. It can really hurt you. What they do is they attach to your checking account, so they have your routing number, account number, and then they kind of, you can't get away from them unless you close your account. But there's good companies. Magilla Loans. If you're looking for a loan and you want to shop it out, you want to buy a building for $2 million, you go to MagillaLoans.com and say, hey, it's very similar to like Expedia, where you shop out your airplane rates. They shop out bank rates, so they say I want a $2 million loan. So they go like Wells Fargo is $2,000, Bank of the West is $3,000. Here's your rate term, kind of cool. So these are all debt financing, all the way up here. Crowdfunding and venture capitalists, angel investors, those are all primarily equity financing. You're going to give up part ownership of your company. And crowdfunding is more popular. Crowdfunding, without getting into it, there's a lot of legalities with it. It'd be like taking all these loans right here, getting everybody together and getting a bunch of money, getting the community involved, your local church, your local council member, and put the money together, and then some will take equity, and so there's many different forms of crowdfunding financing. They're also online too, like Kiva Zip, you can go there. And there's also, invoice financing, we have a new sponsorship, JD Factors and Annie Mass should be here for questions if you have any questions. They do invoice financing. So if you do a lot of local, city, county, state, federal contracts, they could, if you have invoices, large invoices, they could advance your invoices, charge you some money for that. But they can get you money really quick, super fast, and it might be the best way for you to do that. It's better if you use that as interim financing. Don't carry it too long because it's kind of expensive. But it's a lot less expensive than some of the online lending platforms, though. And then almost done. So this under K 401k. So if you have an IRA, so you work for the state, county, or somewhere for a long time, and you have an IRA or 401k, and you roll it into an IRA. There's some financial advisors out there that can take that IRA and inject it into a C corp, like pre-tax, which is kind of cool. And you can kind of operate, pay yourself through that. It's kind of neat ways to do financing. I know I talked about California Capital. California Capital is they work with all your banks. Say you love Mechanics Bank. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say any banks. If you say you love your bank and they make you feel so happy when you go in there and you get coffee and donuts, but they can't approve your loan, you can ask them if they partner with California Capital. Very similar to SBA. California Capital is a state guarantee program. SBA is a federal guarantee program. So if your bank doesn't like SBA, because not all banks do SBA loans, either they can't figure it out or it doesn't work for them or whatever, ask them if they partner with California Capital and they might be able to do your loan. If you love that bank, you don't want to go there.
Are nonprofits eligible for California Capital?
Yes. But California Capital have to find a bank that's interested. So California Capital doesn't lend funds; they guarantee it, just like SBA.
Yeah.
They would have to find a bank that would like your nonprofit.
Okay.
Sorry, not like your nonprofit, but like your whole package. Yeah. Awesome. So I know we're almost at the time. So what I'm going to do is bring up Mike McGrain. He's from Veteran Launch, brand new program, really exciting. So this would pertain to all the veterans in the house, and yeah, I'll bring up Mike real quick.
I've been a lender doing SBA loans for over 20 years, and banks were never really excited about startups. The last couple of banks, they weren't too excited about anything. And I was approached back in November by Veteran Launch. They were putting together a team of veterans to lend to veterans. So that's all I lend to. We use the Community Advantage loan program, which is guaranteed by the SBA, and it is $25,000 to $250,000. And we're extremely aggressive for startups. Half of what we have funded is restaurants or bars. So, you know, you're in good company. Veteran Launch has been around for over 35 years. I'm sorry, let me take that back. Our parent company, which was OBDC until last Monday, is now called Main Street Launch. They started in Oakland, and they've been financing small businesses for a really long time. They're a nonprofit. We generate the loans, and we sell them so that we can continue to generate even more loans. But we maintain a relationship. We're servicing. We sell the guaranteed portion, I should say. So we still have a relationship with you until the loan's paid off. So the first thing we do is we do this thing called a SBA predictive score. We don't look at the FICO. Let me back up. What happens is I put in some general information, the SIC code or the industry classification that your business is in, your address, the name of the business, if you have one yet, the address for the business, and then it does a soft search in Experian or Equifax. So it's not a hit on your credit, but it comes back with a score. And as long as that score is 120 or greater, then that's the green light from the SBA to go ahead. You've preliminary qualified already. And you know, I started in January and I haven't had one that didn't qualify yet. So that's a good start. SBA says that if over the millions of loans that they've done, since they were started, their data says that if the business scores at least 120, chances are they're going to pay you back. I can tell you that we're an extremely aggressive lender. because the default rate on these loans is 1%. That's lower than most banks locally. So we want to find good businesses, good borrowers that will be able to hire people. You know, because you're talking about jobs. Just since January, the loans I've either approved and funded or am working in my pipeline, that's already over 100 jobs. New jobs that this economy didn't have before. Yes?
What if I have a partner that is a veteran?
Is what?
A veteran?
A veteran?
A veteran.
Thank you for asking. I was going to get to that, but since you brought it up, we only require that the veteran have at least 20% ownership or greater. So, you know, you could be a veteran, could be a minor owner, and we still want to do it. Now, in order to get a lot of government contracts, usually the government says, like the VA and other, you know, even the state, their stipulation might say 51% or at least 50% ownership by the vet in order to classify yourself as a veteran business. We're only looking for 20%. So there's a veteran involved in there somewhere, and it just makes it a little easier for us to qualify.
What do you mean by, what did you say about contract? Like, can you repeat that part?
A contract?
No, did you say something about federal contract?
Oh yes, a lot of veterans will apply to get federal contracts to be a supplier. Maybe they have a janitorial service, maybe they have a printing company,
Okay.
maybe they fix cars.
But it's not a
Okay?
requirement, like it doesn't
The
have to.
federal government has, in order to sort of spread their contracts, to share the contract distribution, they'll have a certain percentage where they want to lend to minorities. They want to lend to, I'm sorry, not lend, they want to give contracts to minorities, so a minority would provide that service, whether it's delivery or janitorial, whatever.
And what
So
if-
veterans is the same thing. They also have it for women only. You know, so you have to be a woman-owned business in order to qualify to get that, to bid on that contract.
But what if your business is not a business that the federal would need?
No,
I'm
you
saying
don't need, it's not required.
It's not a requirement.
No, it's not required. It's just
Oh, so
another
that's
way
what
for you to get additional business. If you, I just threw that out there because, you know, if you were a veteran, I'm gonna go get a veteran contract, then usually you have to be 50% owned by a veteran, that business. Yeah.
I think what I read was 51% and actively working the business.
Right, yeah, they don't want just a puppet veteran in there that, you know, doesn't even show up at the work, but they're getting all these veteran contracts. Okay, so my loans can be used for startup, expansion, refinance, to purchase a business or a franchise. I'm gonna give you a quick example. There was a local business broker that sent a flyer out to 400 people in his little database talking about our program. The next day, we got a lead from this guy. He's a local company, marketing company, and he had 5 different liabilities on his balance sheet. We refinanced all 5 of them, $53,000. His monthly cash flow outflow to just those businesses went from $3,000 down to $600. He's really happy with me. And you know, that's just one example where I had the guy approved in a week because, you know, he had his financials there, he had a personal financial statement that he filled out. He didn't need a business plan because it's just a straight refinance of debt. And one of those loans that he had was the, you know, the predatory loans where he was paying 25% interest. And you know, once you get into those, it's really hard to get out. You know, and sometimes, you know, when you walk down the street and you see someone that is, you know, that the sign says, we only take, ATM's broken, we only take cash. Well, I found out the other day that it could be that that business has one of those predatory loans where they take the money out of the checking account if the customer uses a credit card or a debit card. And so they look at your charges, and then daily they're taking money out in order to get their loan paid back. So these guys put the sign on the door saying, our ATM's broken today. So, you know, you can still pay cash, but then that lender doesn't get their money. So there's all kinds of tricks that these predatory lenders are doing to, yeah, we'll give you the money fast, but a lot of times it's not in your best interest.
Does anybody have any questions? Sorry to.
I just got two more things. Okay, so we covered, there's two qualifying things that are kind of a no-no for our department, and that's, we can't have a bankruptcy in the last 3 years. If you had one older, we want to hear your story. I financed one the other day they had a 590 FICO score. But she had a good explanation for it, and her other partner was a little stronger, but I liked their story, so it didn't slow us down. And the last thing is, we can't have a loss to the government. So if you defaulted on student loans, or maybe you had a big tax lien and you took a settlement where the government actually took a loss on that liability, or a loan that was guaranteed by the government, basically, that you defaulted, then I can't get you a loan because my loans are guaranteed by the government. So I've got some flyers over there. Oh, they were. I've got more over there. I've got business cards. If any veterans or anyone that has a veteran as a partner, I'd love to talk to you. Thanks very much.